The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions, how's it going?
Dude, so good. I don't know. It's fine. Things are fine. Life goes on. I actually had, I was at a conference a couple weeks ago and we hadn't done this event in years because of the, world ending catastrophe that happened. And the amount of time people are like, oh, how have you been? Hey, how have you been? How have you been? After maybe the 20th one of those, I was just like, I don't know, I'm still alive. Like, I just got completely satiated on the pleasantries of like, oh, I've been good. How are you?
See, that's why you always just got to go. For me, every single time somebody says, how you doing? I'm living the dream. How have you been? Living the dream. Always living the dream. And people are like, and it's funny because to me, it's a phatic phrase, right? Somebody's saying like, how have you been? How are you doing? They don't really care. They're just starting a conversation, right? But the really funny thing is because I always say living the dream, then all of a sudden I get like, some people get 2 layers deep into the chess match, and I now have heard several responses several times. So now I've got a canned response for their canned response. So it's like a riposte, right? Where somebody goes, I'll say, living the dream. They're like, I don't know. It could be a nightmare. And I was just like, no, I think this one's a dream. Yeah, it's like, well, you got to be, I don't know, man.
What the hell?
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Like, even nightmares are dreams. And I'm like, that's true, but this doesn't feel like that,
Yeah. Yeah. I can't do a good, God, how do you even say his name? It's like Werner. It's the
Werner
German
Herzog.
Yeah, thank you. Like, I can't do a good impression of his voice, but a couple. I don't think I've actually ever told you this, but a couple times I've had people, just like, oh, hey, how's it going? How you been? And I've said "live in the dream," but in a very flat, right? And they're like, oh, hey, man, how you been? I haven't seen you in a long time. Live in the dream, and and like that generates a very uncomfortable where they're trying to reconcile the literal words and the way those words were spoken, right? It's very like awkward. And then, cause I'm doing that for my lulz. Like that's for me. That's not for them. I don't care if they have a pleasant interaction. I think it's funny, but then you have to, you got to keep that in, right? You can't let them know like I am screwing with you on purpose and your discomfort is where I'm deriving my enjoyment.
Absolutely. And what I was going to say at the beginning is that, you looked like you might've been a little tired. So if you needed to, you could go outside and the wind could wake you up.
Boo. No, big stretch.
No.
Big stretch.
No, you know what? What I really wanted was your upsetness. And that's the thing that
Hey, we got there.
Yeah, we did it.
All right. We played Wind Waker. This has been a listener request for a long time that we couldn't honor because this game came out in March of 2003. So we just recently passed the 20-year mark. So we're finally doing the thing that a bunch of people have asked for. This came out on the GameCube originally, and later the Wii U, I guess, the HD re-release. And everyone is desperately waiting for it to come to the Switch because nobody bought a Wii U. So if you want to play the HD re-release, it's kind of a pain. But it hasn't been ported to the Switch yet. I think Zelda's been getting a lot of love in the last few years. Like they've been porting a lot of the games to like Switch Online and stuff. I think we'll get it eventually, but yeah, it's unfortunately GameCube or Wii U only. It's Zelda. It's Waterworld Zelda. So
yep,
it's an action adventure game, third person, still has Z targeting. You gotta collect a bunch of MacGuffins so you can get the stabby MacGuffin and then use the stabby MacGuffin to kill Ganondorf. Like it is a Zelda, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but like we are firmly into formula territory for the Zelda franchise. Like this may even be like the height of the formula before it got so formulaic it became like a self-parody in some of the games. So I mean
I would probably say not to spoil things too much, but I would probably say that this might be the last Zelda until Breath of the Wild that like had some creative spark in it, Like,
I mean, I would agree with that, but you and I feel similarly about this series.
Right, because, I mean, that's the thing is that you had, like, Ocarina, right, where they're like 3 dimensions and big epic story, and then they were, with this one, whether you like it or not, they said, you know what, we're going to try something a little bit different. And even the formula of the 3, then 5 or 7, like whatever, because normally it's you collect 3 things, then you collect the sword, then you do like 5 to 7 things, and then you fight the big bad. Even that was split up. Like, you know, I know, I thought it was weird when I was like, okay, I'm going to go get the 3rd pearl, and then the big fish was like, here you go. It's like, what? There's no dungeon, you know?
No.
And
here's pearl.
and I was like, what? Thank you, because I feel like more people, if you're like, hey, I'm working on saving the world, they'd be like, how could I help? Not, you must face my trials before I could, you know? So, but yeah, so they did a number of different creative things. Some you might like, some you might hate. But then I think that this one's polarizing response was when they said, oh, no, we're not taking any more chances. We're going to stick to the formula and make it more and more formula. And then, you know, so this is the last one where they tried something weird, you know?
Yeah, and I appreciate that because that is the direction of Zelda I like. My nostalgia experience for this game is I didn't, because this came out at a time when my relationship to the GameCube was, do I have a way to play Smash Brothers with my friends? So like I had a GameCube, and I think I've talked about this before. Like I had one, and then I traded in to get a PS2 again, and then I went back, and like we had friends with GameCubes that were basically Smash Brothers machines. So like I could have played this game, but 1, I didn't have reliable access to the hardware, and 2, I had no interest in seeking out reliable access to the hardware because I had already closed the door on 3D Zelda, right? I had tried Ocarina originally and didn't care for it. I never tried Majora's Mask. Like I actually played Twilight Princess. Was before this or after?
After. Okay.
So I skipped this one and then later tried Twilight Princess and was just like, no, I don't think I care for 3D Zelda. So my nostalgia experience of this game is mostly the pop culture experience. People criticizing the art style, people saying like they thought it was weird that you're sailing instead of, you know, like walking on land, and like the dungeons felt different because they're kind of like obscured and everything. So I don't really have my own experience. I'm like copy pasting I remember this is how people spoke about it, and now I have my own lived experience.
There you go. It only took, 20 additional years, right? For me, I played and loved the mess out of Ocarina, and then somebody said, hey, there's another 3D Zelda coming out for the GameCube, and I was like, oh man, it's going to be even more awesome. And then I just saw the art aesthetic and said, I cannot imagine this being good. And then I did play it for a bit, but at that point, and again, I was like, what, 20, 19, 20, somewhere in there, young, right? But I'd already I couldn't have told you this at the time, but I had made up my mind that this was going to be a bad game. And so I was just now looking for ways to justify that belief, So I say all that to say that I played it, got about halfway through it, and then just kind of pieced out and went back and played Ocarina because that's the thing that I wanted to play. And so then, and I was like, the big thing for me, and we'll get into this at the time, was that and I've learned this more as I've gotten older, is that I liked playing Zelda because I liked being the hero, right? NES didn't really have too much of a plot, right? But in the Super Nintendo one, you were Link, the hero, the savior of Hyrule. And then in Ocarina, they upped it to be like, you're the hero of time, right? And this one, they're like, you're not a hero. What are you even doing here? And I got real tired real fast of telling me I'm not a hero, especially when I didn't feel like a hero anyways, because the art style doesn't really make you feel, doesn't go into this like, empowerment fantasy. So I was like, yeah, I don't care for this. And then, to your point, Twilight Princess came out, and I played it, and I was like, you see, this is what I wanted. I wanted big Link, like, looking awesome, being Link, being cool, but there was just something about it where I was like, I don't think I like this, and I don't know why, but I wouldn't admit it at the time, because it wasn't, I was just still crapping all over Wind Waker.
Yeah,
I was
it wasn't
like, well,
the
it's not Wind
cartoon,
Waker.
it was serious dark shadows.
Exactly, and I was 25, and that's what I wanted, serious dark shadows, and then, but as I was playing, I was like, something's just not fun about this. And now that we have been doing this for a while, I can go back and be like, oh, right, because of all of the things that they did, that our art style does not make a game. But so it was nice to kind of go back and play it a little bit more. Some things they did well, some things they did bad. We'll get into it.
You did just remind me that one of a perfect example of my pop culture conception about this game is you saying they constantly remind you are not the hero. And then when I played through the game, I was like, yeah, they do talk about it, but eventually they admit like you're a hero, and like, you know, Lunk, because I always name him Lunk, right? Like Lunk, you're the hero of the wind, and like you're the successor to the hero of time. And I was like, oh, okay, this is exactly what is hard to reconcile when you are either young or like immature in a hobby. Is I just adopted that as truth. Like when you said like, oh, they're just constantly slandering you, I was just like, oh man, I guess this is going to be a game of people constantly crapping on me. And they do say it, but it's not like every single button press they're like, by the way, you suck.
Yeah, no, and no, it is not that. That was also, you know, my nostalgia experience, right? Like it was this grain of truth that grew over time. But yeah,
became a mighty oak of lies.
But I mean, especially when you compare it to Ocarina, right, where from the get-go you like leave the Kokiri Forest and you go to Zelda and she's like, you're gonna be the hero of time, it's you, man, it's all you. And you're like, yeah, it is all me. And then you go around and then like, you know, you pull the Master Sword and the sage is like, you're the hero of time, and we needed to like put you in, like the whole time you're being told you're the man. And this one you kind of have to earn it, because they're like, no, you're just some. And again, like when that's reinforced by the art style of like, oh, I'm a little kid. And they're like, yeah, you are a little kid, dumb little kid. Think you do little kid stuff. And I was like, especially because at the time, again, we were in our late teens, right? Early 20s. I was a little kid, right? I'm like, I get enough of adults telling me I don't know what I'm doing and that I'm a little kid in my day job. I want to play this so that way I can be the friggin' hero of time, man.
Yeah. Well, here's a good segue into shilling, because not only can you go on our website and fill out the feedback form and request games, or go into the Discord and request games, you can watch me play these games on Twitch. And someone who was in the chat room was like, because I said exactly what we were just talking about, like, oh yeah, George, you know, kind of set this expectation for me that you're not this hero. But people do eventually say like, oh, you got the Master Sword, like you must be the hero. Like, look at all these heroic things you've done. And someone in the chat was like, yeah, that's one of the things I always loved about this game, is that the thing that gets Lunk into the adventure is not to save the world, it's to save his sister, right? Mm-hmm. And then along the way, he's like, well, I guess, you know, while I'm at the store getting milk, I might as well save the world, right? And so you like, you kind of stumble into it. But I think that is also like an extreme interpretation, because it's like, yeah, that was the inciting incident, but you were destined to be the hero, right? Just like Ganondorf is destined to be a prick, and Zelda is destined to be Zelda, right? And I did like that Zelda's like a twist where she's not lying like she is in Ocarina. She actually doesn't know that she's Zelda, right? As Tetra.
Right.
But I was like, oh, this is good. So I have George feeding me like one extremist view, and somebody else who's like, no, man, it's a small personal story. And I'm like, it does start that way, but really the truth is you were always the hero, and they just reveal it differently, right? In Ocarina, they slap you across the face with it. In this, it's like a slow burn. I'm not saying one is right or wrong, but it is funny that like you both had these kind of like, this is the part I care about, and this is the part I focus on. So anyway, do that. Watch me play these games on Twitch, and then give us money. If you want to support the show, you can just leave a rating and review. That's helpful. You can recommend a specific episode. That is more helpful. But if you want to actually spend a few bucks, you can do a Patreon. Links in the show notes. Everybody who does the Patreon gets the after show, even if you support for as little as $1. But if you support at a higher level, you can get your name shouted out. So first, I need to thank our 4-bit portables, David, Jacob, Joshua, Keith, and new 4-bit portable Martin, who is added in a 5th currency that we are getting Patreon dollars in.
Ooh.
So that's super cool. Our 8-bit classics, Yarno, J. Brent, John, and Kevin, and our 16-bit hero, Michael.
And for $1,000, I will let you know what I named my character, because it was very juvenile.
That's fun. I also don't know, so I can't even ruin this for you.
Exactly, right? Yeah. Gonna cost you a cool G, but it was stupid.
That's exciting. Was this, by this point, because I always go with Lunk, which is only 4 letters, do you have like a pretty big range? Like, could you name yourself like Fahugugas, something that's like 20 letters?
Yeah, it's not, I think it's like 9 or something like that. It's not infinite, but it's not, it's not like I think in one of the Game Boy ones, it's like 5 characters or something like that.
Yeah. For a long time, it was like Link plus a letter, which would get you up to like, Steve or David.
Or Poop. Poop plus.
Poop plus. All right, should we talk about what this game looks like since we already kind of hinted at it?
We should. So kind of just to get this part out of the way, right? Is that this looks nothing like what you would consider Zelda to look like, right? And I would even make the argument that this Zelda is singular in its art direction and style, in that all of the others.
The Minish Cap is, I think, a derivative of this, but because it's pixel art, it doesn't have that same cartoony cell shading. I think you're right. Like, this is the most extreme cartoony example, but it's not. Yeah, it's not purely unique. Not if you're being a real pedant about it.
Which is what we do, because that's actually. Oh, and actually, kind of while we're talking on the show, one thing that I would like to do eventually for the after show is we should play a game of actually, because when you said being very pedantic, I'm like, well, that's what the show's about. Anyways, but no, because again, like what I was, and you kind of you agreed with what I was going to say, which is that even with Minish Cap, right, is that the box art style is very similar to the game, right? But it's pixel art. So either it's pixels, in which case it's got like the typical, Zelda, 3/4 view, right, top down, right, and you look like pixelated Link to varying degrees of quality, or you kind of look like a guy, or a kid or whatever, right? But you look, humanoid or elven, right? This is one where they said, nah, it's cartoons all the way down, right? And that, I think, was, really, really unique and really interesting. And, I mean, your character model is so different that it warrants having its own character in Smash Brothers, right? So that's different, Yeah,
called Toon Link.
Yeah, Toon Link. So they decided to do something new. So the visual style is, if you've never seen this game, which I can't believe that you listened to the show and have never seen it, but it is wildly different, for better or for worse.
I'm on the for better side. I honestly don't remember, but if I'm being honest with myself, when I was the age we were when this game came out, there's a good chance that I went like, oh, that looks silly, right? So I don't know for sure, but I'm willing to give myself the not benefit of the doubt in this case, and was probably like, oh, that's all like cartoony and kind of silly and weird. In the intervening decades, I have come around on the fact that I have not just broadened my artistic taste, but that I like cutesy crap a lot, like a lot, right? Like, so the fact that this is like kind of cutesy and silly is endearing to me now and not off-putting in the slightest. And the fact that I can just admit like, oh, this is an very like lovingly crafted and well-made art style, because the characters being kind of cutesy and cel-shaded is I think the most striking thing. Like, you look at Link and you're like, whoa, he's like a little adorable toy, right? He's like a Japanese Precious Moments doll, but the entire world is that style. So like, yes. Explosions look like that kind of, I don't know what it's called, but that Japanese like whooshy cloud art style that I love so much, right?
I specifically called out the smoke animation billboard in my notes. Like, it's really cool looking.
It's so cool. The waves are like these really simple peaks, but it creates, when they're layered over the whole ocean, it creates this like very vibrant, roiling looking, oh God, the weather's so tumultuous, but really it's like a few white lines on a solid blue background. Like, it's very, very thoughtful in the details, because you could make an argument that the world is actually pretty detail light, right? A lot of things are either flat colors or very, very simple textures, and yet everything is positioned in such a way that it's like, oh, you always know what's going on, you always know where something is, you always know what something is, right? So if you put this side by side with like even Majora's Mask on the N64, or then Twilight Princess after this, you'd be like, oh my God, there's like, it's just flat colors. But then when you actually play the game, everything is clear and understandable, which in an action game is super helpful. Like, you want things to not be super muddy and obnoxious and impossible to like tell enemy from environment. And I do need to give a special shout out for the facial animations, because
yes,
you could draw, like, my children who are under 10 could probably draw these characters' faces exactly accurate, but the way they're animated, going from big wide eyes to like little squinty eyes, giant pupils like moving around when Link is like looking at different things, the really expressive mouths, it's literally childishly simple. A child could easily draw these faces, and yet all the characters seem super expressive. Like during conversations and cutscenes and stuff, you always know exactly how people feel. Link often feels like, right? Because everybody's telling him he sucks and he kind of doesn't want to do this, but he really wants to save his sister. So a lot of his reactions are like, oh no.
Yeah, he's not, the adventurer who wants to go out on an adventure. He's doing this because the call to adventure, he can't reject it, Yeah, no, I agree. I thought the faces were very expressive. And to your point, right, is that, when I was younger, so I think that the analogy I would use is that this is to Ocarina, right, or Twilight Princess. This is the Twilight Princess as Teen Titans Go is to Teen Titans.
100%. Yes, exactly right.
Right. And so that's the thing, is that a lot of people, especially at the time, were like, I don't like Teen Titans Go. It's all goofy and cartoony and stupid and I hate it. And it's like, it's its own thing, man. It's a comedy show. And Teen Titans was a drama, So like, again, so when you go to the well expecting, flat water and you get sparkling, right? It's a little bit different. I do think though, too, that that it kind of pours into the power fantasy as well, because like, you are this cartoon, right? Cartoons are for kids. And I think that honestly, if we're actually giving ourselves the benefit of the doubt, society has come around on that a little bit too, so it wasn't just us, right? But, hey, cartoons are for kids. I'm a big boy, I'm a big man and I want a real story, but you know what? Fine. I'm a little cartoon person and you're not the hero of time. It's like, well, what am I doing? So they kind of double down on the, disempowerment kind of, which I thought was interesting. One of the things that I want to make sure I touch on visuals is so one of the things that's very important in video games, especially in open worlds, which you could definitely make the argument that this is, right? I would probably make the argument that this is more open world than a lot of Zeldas are, because there's less you can't go here, than in other Zelda games, right? And a lot of them, it's like, I want to go to Death Mountain. No, you need a note from Princess Zelda. And it's like, okay. This is just like, man, big open sea, go die, I say all that to say that, so one of the things that's very important in a game like this, and I saw a presentation about it for Breath of the Wild, is you need something that draws the player to go in a direction, right? So that's like the Sheikah Towers or, big landmarks where you can say like, oh, what's that thing? And you see it on the horizon and you go to it. This is that personified, because you basically only have the interesting thing.
Yes. Yeah. Imagine if you lived in a completely flat nothing and there were buildings every like few hundred miles, right? Like that is what being on the open sea is like.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was kind of clever because I had a kind of an emotional roller coaster about how I felt about this. But initially I was like, oh, that's really clever, because now there's no other junk cluttering up the thing I'm supposed to go to. So I just, set my sails, I go in a direction, I'm like, oh yeah, ooh, what's that? And then I get that same kind of anticipation of like, oh, it's getting bigger. Oh, I can see more of it. Ooh, what is it? And at first I was like, that's really clever and really good. And then I came around and I was like, no, I don't like it. And here's why. Is because initially it built that sort of thing, but then eventually I got bored because I'd see the thing I want to go to, and I still had like 1.5 minutes of real time to sail up to it. And I said, okay, well, why, when I see something off in the distance in a normal game, I don't feel bored. And I think the reason why is because there are no micro challenges to get to the thing. Normally it's like, okay, well, I'm on ground, so I've got to climb this mountain, I got to move around this thing, I got to kill this bad guy, I got to do, there's a bunch of like, I can see the thing I'm trying to get to, and there are a bunch of little challenges along the way before I get to the big challenge of the thing. This doesn't really have that. It's more like just, I'm on the sea.
Yeah, and we will pick that apart more, because I have similar thoughts about the nature of islands with featureless nothing in between them.
Yeah, I brought it up in visuals because it is very striking visually.
Well, and all of that visual, or all of those mechanics, are supported by that blue sky, blue ocean, loneliness kind of aesthetic, right? Is no matter how photorealistically this was rendered, or how, XKCD black and white pencil art this was rendered, like, you can see the big thing on the horizon, right? Once you hit the draw distance for it. And then then you got to get there. And there's and it's it, right? You are doing the same thing you were doing before you saw the big thing on the horizon, which is letting the wind go in the direction that you're trying to go, right? I mean, arguably, you're not even holding down the control stick because the wind is blowing you, right? So like you're not even doing that if you're going between like big stretches that are far apart without a ton of interesting things in between. It's you very quickly get to a point where you're like, wow, the ocean looks really cool, the sky looks really cool. I'm not doing anything though, right? So like you're given a little too much time to try to artistically appreciate things that you quickly get satiated on appreciating.
Yep.
Yeah. I do need to talk about the sound and music in this universe because I had a weird realization playing this game. I don't think anyone in the Zelda universe, like with a couple exceptions, can sing. I think this is a universe without singing. And here's why. Everything in the world makes music, right? When you hit an enemy that takes like 4 or 5 hits, like there's music, like literal music that plays to let you know like you're doing a combo, right? Every explosion, every item use, every footstep, every sound echoing off the walls in the caves, which there's a lot of, right? There's a lot of like rich sound design. When you pick up different items, make different item pickup noises, right? I think there's like half a dozen different ones. Every little thing is so musical. The world is musical, right? You control the wind with the Wind Waker, right? So you have like this magic baton that is how you conduct things. And there's like 12 different songs or whatever you learn across the game to do different things. Like the whole universe is musical. And then everyone's voice is a grating, gasping nightmare. The shop guy, Beetle, sounds like someone trying desperately to do an impression of Morty from Rick and Morty. He's just like, you go into his shop and the way he greets you is he goes, oh,
yeah.
Just like, why, what, how did, what? And then there's the guy who's like, he exists to draw your attention to things, but he stands on obvious places and looks through a telescope at less obvious things like on the horizon. And so he exists to make you look over there, right? You see somebody looking at a thing and you're like, what are we looking at? Right. And his voice also is like this grating, obnoxious thing. A lot of people, just when you talk to them, there's no spoken dialogue, right? It's just all sound effects, which has become like a Zelda staple. It just everyone is like, but then you're like, oh, wow, that was weird. And then as you're walking away, you like chop down the grass and the grass makes like this beautiful whooshy noise when you slice through it. And it's very harmonic. And then, rupees come out and you pick them up and it makes like different harmonic noise, little chimes, depending on how many rupees it is. It's like, these people would never bother to learn how to sing because music is just everywhere. Everything is music. Why would you invent singing when everyone's voice sounds like a horrible nightmare groan and yet the grass is making music? Like, so I believe that at least in Wind Waker, because I know in one of the Game Boy ones, there's like a character who canonically is a singer, but like at least in the game or in Wind Waker, I believe like this is a universe without singing. Like all music is either naturally occurring or instrumental.
Yeah, I think agreed. I co-sign that. That fan theory. So I agree with your thing. I'm going to say just a different thing as like a thought, right? Which is that like what if they find all of those noises that nature makes annoying? And like they think that they sound awesome, right? And it's just us, right? So they're like, "Rah!" They're like, "Oh, I have the best voice in the world!" Rah! You know?
Yeah, we had to invent singing because the grass is always making those chime noises when you pick up rupees.
Which would be what I'd love is just at one point when like a monster dies, it makes like a chime noise, just so that we could be like, that's what the grass. Oh my god, the grass sounds like monsters dying. Yeah. Is the grass alive? Is that why it gives up rupees? It's because we're holding it at knife point and it's just like, please take my rupees. Don't kill me.
Yeah.
Dark.
It is dark. But it's super weird to me that and their voices honestly are not like Beetle's voice is ridiculous. Like I don't know what the hell were they thinking, but like most of the voices are fine, right? It's a lot of, especially for hero characters. So like Link, Tetra, Ganondorf, there's a lot of like what do we call it? Aspirating, right? A lot of like breathing, like
Yeah.
right, a lot of right. The stereotype of like Link gasping at stuff because he doesn't talk. Tetra also makes noises like that. Ganondorf also does a lot of like ha ha ha. Right? There's a lot of like breathy noises from those characters because it's supposed to be talking, so they include breathy sounds. But then just everything else is so pleasant. Like the universe is just made of pleasant sounds. Like nothing aharmonic, nothing discordant. Like it would be so wonderful to just walk around in this universe because it would sound like the world was singing to you.
Yeah, no, and I think that like the sound effects from that standpoint, the sound effects, voices, things like that, it's like kind of like the stick figures of sound, because I think that, and I kind of always liked that Zelda did this because, Ganon will say, Link, you've stumbled into my trap, right? And you know that he sounds like that because what you hear is ha 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 ha, and so your brain goes like, oh, this is what he sounds like, right? So even the guy who sounds awful is like, rah, he's like, oh hey, like man, like come buy some stuff,
buy some bait.
Yeah, man, you want some bait? And you're like, oh, this person's unpleasant to speak with. I just want to buy my bait and leave. Maybe that's why he's alone. Anyways,
he actually does have a tiny bit of dialogue. I know because when you buy anything from him, he goes, "Thank you."
Yeah,
and I'm just I would rather go the whole game without ever filling in my map than have to buy one more piece of bait from you.
No, so I kind of want to picture like Link walking in and the bait's like, 1 blue rupee, and he like slides a 20 across and he goes, no. The other 15 for you not to talk to me ever. Like I will pay double. You just don't speak. Money isn't the problem. Money is not the problem. I have tons of money. I only have so many moments in my life to hear you not talking, and I want them all.
I don't know why, but I'm imagining like instead of the finger pressed against the lips, like reaching out and putting your finger in front of someone else's lips, just doing that with either the Wind Waker or the Master Sword, just like pressing the whole thing against their face. Like no. I pointed at what I wanted. I handed you the money. Speech does not need to come into this.
Now, not to drag this out too much, but like now I'm picturing like you like rub the Master Sword on him, and it blows him across the ship, and all of a sudden you hear dun dun dun, and like it's Ganon, and he's like, ha ha ha, you saw through my disguise, because he's the bait guy, and he's doing it to just annoy Link, or Lunk, right? Anyways, all of this is true. So one thing that I did, this bears on the overarching music in no way, but I was so proud of myself that I had to bring it up, which is the opening music when you're on Outset Island, right? Is the same exact score as used in the Kokiri Forest in Ocarina of Time, just pirated up a bit. And I thought that was clever, and I liked it a lot, and I thought I was clever for noticing it.
You are, and they do things like that throughout. There is a lot of music reuse or inspiration where it is homages, where it is obviously this same melody, but they've mixed it differently. It's done using different instruments. It's maybe a little faster, a little slower, or some combination of these things. But there's a lot of that, and I like that because I like this music, but I could also see someone who is worried about the formula being like, oh God, even all of the music is kind of the same. I do think they did the right thing by making a lot, maybe all, definitely a lot of times in the dungeons, like music free, right? You can hear the lava, bubbling, you can hear water dripping, you can hear, rustling in the grass or whatever, but a lot of times there isn't. Because then you think back to like Zelda 1, where every dungeon had the like do 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 do, right, and it is kind of it is kind of driving you on. Like it's good music, and it makes things feel like kind of tense and scary, because even once all the monsters are killed in the room, there's still this kind of like tense, but you're not safe yet sort of music. But I do enjoy because they tried to integrate the combat in a little bit more deeply. Like you get combat music when you're fighting a monster, which is also a clue, like there are monsters now, right? Because those goddamn bats come down from the ceiling, and like you don't always notice. So it's like quiet or something else at least, right? And then you get the battle music, which kind of cues you in, like, oh, fighting is happening now, or at least it better be happening soon. So I do think that's not just good mechanically, but it's just pleasant to listen to. Like the music is executed with the same kind of woven into reality love and care that you get with all the sound effects minus the voices.
Yep. Agreed. One of the last things I had is just kind of a minor note for visuals. I mean, I had other stuff, but the one other thing I wanted to mention was the fairies look wildly different than they do in any of the other
kind of terrifying.
Zeldas.
A little bit.
Kind of terrifying, right? Like, because they've got, the fairy queens, whatever, the big fairies, they have like 4 arms and, a almost a mask-like face, because...
Big scary laugh, too. They're like...
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't know why I liked that a little bit, because it wasn't... And again, I feel like that the fairies are where they always say, what different thing can we do? Because they're always wildly different, right? But in Ocarina, I feel like that they were like, yeah, what if they were like crazy 90s like pop fairies? And you're like, oh, okay. This to me, actually, I like these fairies better because they are not of this world, So it really drove home where it's just kind of like, oh, hey, it's a fairy. And as opposed to like, oh, it's a little thing I'm going to, put in a jar and, oh, look how cute it is. Hi, Tinkerbell. Like, I saw this thing. I was like, I think that you could probably kill me with a power word if you needed to. I don't know, like, oh, you're giving me a gift. Okay, cool. Goodbye, nice fairy. Please don't kill me. You know?
I adventure at your grace.
Yes. Yeah, like you walk in, you're like, my liege,
Yeah.
I just thought it was kind of a cool design.
I think that is interestingly juxtaposed again, because that's like the queen fairies, whatever. I also can't remember what they're called. But then the fairies that you see out in the wild and you can catch in jars, they, on the overworld map, they look like the little, ball of light with wings, just like they have since Ocarina. I was really struck by when you catch one and you do the little like, and you hold it up and like, you're basically showing it to the player directly, right? Because the camera is like looking down. They have a very, very sad look on their face because they know they are now on death row, right? Like, no fairy is ever released from a bottle. Fairies are eaten out of bottles. Like,
they are consumed.
When the next time that cork comes out, that's walking to the electric chair. So the fact that they are literally like, and remember, these are all faces like a child could draw. So it is a big, simple, cartoony, frowny face with a tear next to the eye. I was just like, that is kind of a like tacit admission that these fairies do not survive helping you, right? Like when they restore your hearts, they don't then go back to the fairy fountain. Like that's the end for them.
Yes. Yeah. No. And so that raises a couple of other questions I want to run the ground real fast. So one is that I agree with you. They're not happy, not only because they know that they're going to be consumed, but all of their moments before they're consumed are spent in like a 2 foot by 2 equivalent 2 foot by 2 foot by 5 foot jar, like that's not, I mean, even enough for you to move around in. Like they're basically being held completely stationary until
it's a torture
death.
chamber. Yeah.
Right. So I say all that then to say then why would the great fairy be helping you if you're doing this to like their ostensibly their progeny, right? And so my new theory I came up with just now is that the fairies are non-violent creatures, right? Like they cannot hurt, right? And so she has recognized that you are eating her young in the attempt to complete your goal. So they help you to complete your goal because then you'll retire and you'll stop snatching fairies.
Destroying Ganondorf is the only way to save fairy kind.
Yeah. So that's the mythos now.
There could be like a Logan's Run thing happening here where like the great fairy has to believe that they all like return to the ether, or maybe they literally do, right? So like maybe death is not the end for them. It makes life unpleasant and dying is unpleasant, but maybe that's not the end, which is why they like still kind of go along with it, right? Like if you knew heaven was real, you would like, if you were positive the afterlife was real, you would behave a little differently than if you were like, oh, I sure hope it's real. I'm afraid that it's real. But if you're positive it was real, you would probably make slightly different choices.
Oh God, it's all real. Oh, why did you make me doubt it? Oh, I blame you. Oh no.
Yes, exactly like that.
What is he talking about? That was tons of evidence. So, gameplay?
No, one last thing about the art style. Link is left-handed.
Yes.
Link is still left-handed in this game. This may not be literally the last game where he's left-handed, but this is very near the end. These are the sunset years of Link being left-handed.
He's left-handed in Twilight Princess as well.
He's left-handed in Twilight Princess on the GameCube, but on the Wii, they made him right-handed because of people like you.
Yep. Which, the bulk of us.
yes, the overwhelming majority.
In fact, I would say there'd be a lot less people like you if we had stayed on top of breaking you of that when you were young.
I don't know. Rulers still exist. You all got lazy.
Now, I remember somebody showing me like this thing where it was like a graph of left-handedness over the years, right? There's like a huge spike in like the 60s or something like that. And they're like, somebody was like, what happened? It's like, we stopped trying to crush people's spirits.
Yeah, dude. I mean, our parents, my mother in Catholic school was forced to write. I mean, they didn't beat her, but she was forced to write with her right hand. And then she was only in Catholic school for a little while. And so she retained her left-handedness. But it's like, that's one of those things where it's like, oh, well, we would never do that. And it's like, that's not even generations ago. It's a generation ago.
Yep. So,
now we're done. Yeah, now's the time. Now we're there.
All right. So gameplay, kind of already kind of touched on the big kind of power fantasy twist. One of the things that, and this is kind of halfway through, but I'm going to lead with it, which is, so you fight Ganondorf twice, right? You fight him.
Yeah, you fight him in his like shadow form, right?
Oh, sorry. No, I mean like you fight him when he's in his tower, and then the dragon nukes the thing.
Oh, yes. Yeah, you very briefly pretend you have a chance, and then fate intercedes.
Yeah. Because what happens is it's all executed through cutscene, right? So you walk up to Ganon, he's like, ha, ha, ha. You go up to him and you're like, I'm strong. He goes, ha, 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 you are not strong. And then you go, ha, and then, he beats you up, right? I say all that to say I hate it when games do that. And I got it like back in the day, when it was like, oh, we're doing visual novels or whatever the reason was. But by this time in history, I always prefer, especially because the better example of this is Mega Man X, where you fight Vile and then later fight Vile, right? Now because again, like the Master Sword can't deal him damage, right? In its current form, right? So just like, let me fight him, let me fight him and lose, because then instead of like, I've got this one, is that let him wail on me. And then right as he's about to land the killing blow, then I'm saved. Cause then I feel like George Link failed and lost, as opposed to, I could have taken him, just give me a shot, Chief, like, I don't know. So whenever they kind of do the, like, even, and this is going pretty far, right? But like, even like the death of Aerith, or like all these ones where it's just that ludo narrative dissonance of, we're going to take all the control away from you from this important part. Okay, now you can have it back, right? Like, how much more impressive would that death have been if like she died and it's like you have 15 seconds to get to her and you're allowed to run to her, but no matter how fast you run, it always takes at least 18 seconds, so you always come up short. I bet you play that game a million times and like, see if you could cut the corners just right, you'd sweat it, right? So just don't beat me through a cutscene, beat me through play.
So I agree with you conceptually. I think my borders for success are pretty narrow, which lets me kind of straddle both sides of it. So if it's beat me in a cutscene, the cutscene better be brief, right? Like, do not drag the fight out where I am seeing Link, and they don't in this, which is why it didn't bother me. But like, don't make Link have this big epic battle that I'm just watching him have, right? Because then you have time to think exactly what you were saying, which is like, well, I wouldn't have done that stupid thing he just did. I could have won that fight, right? And then the alternative of like, let me do it in actual gameplay and like, let me experience the helplessness. One of the things that makes that so successful in Mega Man X is there's no way for you to regret how that fight goes after. So in Final Fantasies and, a lot of that like style of kind of turn-based RPGs, you get into the story-based you can't win fight and you sure burn a lot of potions trying to win because you think you can win. So if you're going to make me do it mechanically, which I agree with you is the superior way to do it, there needs to be something, even if it shatters the illusion. And I know now that this is a story fight, like maybe don't let me use all of my elixirs trying to win this fight, right? Like do something, right? Where the bad guy's like, oh, we're going to take all your items and equipment away, or we're going to, you fell down and you dropped your bag so you don't have your stuff, right? Like
or like after the battle when you're rescued by whatever Deus Ex Machina gets you out of there, they're like, hey, I think you might have dropped this, or we're going to resupply you, and they give you exactly whatever you used, and that's just whatever's was in the bag that they're like, here's some more supplies, and it's like, weird, the first time I played through it, you gave me 1 health potion, and this time you gave me 17.
Yeah,
huh.
No, 100%, right? Just something to not make me go, I wish that had just been a cutscene, right? Because that's not what you want. You don't want to play the game for 10 or 15 minutes and then say, I wish that had been a 30-second cutscene instead.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, definitely, if it can't be one, you need something to mitigate, the permanency of it. 100% agree with that. But yeah, I think that especially in a game like Zelda in particular, where the whole goal is, when you first start off, you're just a random kid on an island with a random pointy stabby and a shield, right? And then as you go through, you get this arsenal that you can then leverage against the bad guys, and then you get the Sword of Evil's Bane, and you get an awesome, like the point is that these equipment items and the hearts that you get, all of these things are making you more powerful. But if you don't have something to book in that power, because I think that all of the stuff you are actually allowed to fight, you beat. I don't need to be any more powerful. I've got all the tools that I need. Everything I fight,
you are always the correct amount of strong for the challenge you get.
Right, yeah. But I mean, except when you're wailed on in a cutscene, when a giant bird picks you up and tosses you around for no, like when they take that power away from you. So instead, it's like, let me fight the bird and lose, because then I'd be like, you know what? George, acknowledge I need to go out and get more powerful. And then, you get the shield and you get 3 more hearts and you get the Master Sword and you're like, now I've got it. And you beat the bird and you're like, yeah, screw you, bird. And then you go to Ganondorf and you're like, oh, there are levels yet beyond that. Now I need to go get these other things to make me more powerful. It would make me way more engaged in the game than if it's just like, no, you got beat. And it's like, well, I didn't get beat. That nerd got beat, So
yeah, I wasn't even holding the controller.
Yeah, and then it's the game again. I think it goes less. It pushes it less from this is a thing George, want to go do in order to become more powerful, to the game telling me what to go do, which is kind of the direction that Zelda kind of eventually went more and more in, right?
Yeah.
So don't tell me what to do. Let me do my own thing. I get told what to do in the real world. I'm playing this because I want to do my own thing.
Yeah, and I hadn't thought about it this way, so I'm glad you're phrasing it in the way you are, because I don't have a problem with this to a point, right? Because this cutscene is relatively short, and it's clear that it's like, okay, yes, the Master Sword could not hurt him, and I have to go polish it or whatever. So like, all right, so go, polish your sword. So great, but it's
and after that, go polish the Master Sword.
So it's done relatively quickly, so you don't spend a lot. You don't have to or get to spend a lot of time dwelling on it. I agree with you, but like my threshold is still pretty low. Like even though it didn't bother me in this case, it would not have to go on very long. And I know that because, again, just because this is all I've done with my life for 10 months is like in Final Fantasy 14, there's a boss fight that is like, oh, this guy is going to keep coming back, right? And when you fight him the first time and you just immediately get smacked down, right? So like you do go through the motions, but you immediately get smacked down. And then the next time you fight him, it seems like, oh, this might be the time, because this fight is still happening. And if you die, you die. Like you have to get him down, but then you get him to a certain amount of health, which triggers the cutscene that they want to happen. And that was one of the few times in the game where I was just like, why did you? I don't like this guy. Like I want to kill him so that I never have to deal with him again. Not because I want to save the world. Like I just hate this jackass. And weirdly, he actually comes back even later. And I was just like, this guy this is still happening.
You like Bender, like, oh, this guy.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I do have a tolerance for not getting to experience the helplessness and having that incentive to go get stronger, but it's still a relatively low tolerance. And this like just skirts under it. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah. You go in, he smacks you around, bird, dragon. Okay, I guess. All right. Now I have to go polish the Master Sword.
Yeah. And that's the thing is I don't think that, and I'll leave it alone. Like I agree with you that to me, it wasn't a oh, this is unacceptable and I'm angry. But it was like, I feel like I would have cared more about the things that happen later if I was given the agency to feel that lack of power. In the same way that in Mega Man X, I care a lot about getting all those cool power-ups. And then when you wail on Vile, you're like, yeah, how you like me now, man? You fought my first form, but that was 4 forms ago.
Yeah. You shouldn't have left me alone for all that time, because all I've been thinking about is getting strong enough to deck you in the schnoz.
It's like what Frieza says, where he goes, oh, they always go on about the children, but then all they do is grow up and try to kill you, and then I have to kill them as well. So I ask you, who's the real monster? You.
Just in case you forgot, we need to talk about sailing, because that is no question the biggest change, right? Once you are in a village, once you are in a dungeon, once you are linking it up, this game feels very much like Ocarina, or I assume Majora's Mask, or I assume Twilight Princess, right? It is a 3D Zelda once you are into those situations. And I think it's good. Like, I liked the dungeons, and generally I liked the combat way more than I liked the combat in Ocarina. Like, it's still,
yes.
I don't like the Z targeting. I don't think it's executed well, but compared to Ocarina, it felt like this is less of a chore. Still a chore, less of a chore. But the sailing, how you get around the world, is so fundamentally unique, right? Because like in Breath of the Wild later, you really have to rely on the glider to do glider and climbing, right? Get up to something tall and then jump off that tall thing. But
and glide. Don't forget the glide part.
Oh no!
Oh god, I'm playing this game terribly wrong.
No wonder I kept dying. But you have a lot of control over that, and you feel, I think, a lot of agency over that, mostly because of, I think, what you accurately described as micro challenges. And this game is aware of that. They just did not go hard enough. So when you first leave Outset Island, which I love, like the Earthbound style of naming things, just like, where do you start? Outset Island. So is that where all adventures start? No. It's just, they just knew one day you were going to live here. And so thousands of years ago, that's what they named this island.
And then I got the first thing I needed to collect from MacGuffin 1 Island. So MacGuffin, it's spelled Y-O-N-E, but it's pronounced 1.
Yeah, it's pronounced MacGuff 1. So you leave Outset Island, you get the boat and you're like, okay, I got to go sailing. And you very quickly hit the first bits of pseudo randomness you see in the ocean, right? Because the ocean is a big featureless nothing, but like the weird little barrels like pop up with the flags, and you like, oh, there's rupees. And so I'm not just going in a straight line. I'm like kind of zigging and zagging around, and it adds a little bit of variety to it. And sometimes there's like pirate ships and they shoot bombs at you, but you don't really deal with them too much until after you get bombs, because you don't have a great way to defend yourself. And sometimes there's sharks and things. But what I noticed pretty quickly, I was like, oh, this is delightful and this is fun, and there's treasure, and I love like getting the treasure with the grappling hook, and that's like feels super cool until you realize your wallet's full and all those rupees count for nothing. There's a lot of like little things, but then I very quickly realized that those little things are within a certain either corridor between 2 points of interest or within an orbit of a point of interest, right? So like this island has pirates around it, but if I'm far enough off the island, there's no enemies, there's no pirates, there's no sharks, right? Like in this corridor, there's treasure, or there's the like little race thing between the flags. But if I'm just like out in the far ocean, then there's just nothing. And the problem with having interesting things being on the horizon is sometimes they're so far on the horizon you cannot see them. So you can reasonably end up in a place where you're like, is there something interesting out here? I don't see anything interesting, and there's no signs that there's any life out here, but do I keep going until my ship sails off the edge of the world because it's a flat earth? Like, it's very easy to end up going all the way out into the wild blue nothingness, and then you gotta just turn around and sail back, right? So like your fervor for exploration can sometimes be punished, which is not good in a game about exploring. Like, you want that fervor for exploration to almost always be rewarded, if not literally always be rewarded. And that's something like Breath of the Wild and I assume Tears of the Kingdom, since it's literally set in the same world, like those do really well. Like basically any direction you go 20 feet and something interesting happens. But you can't have random monsters out in the middle of the ocean because how would you deal with them, right? You don't even see the sharks and things until you have the bow or the boomerang because you have no way to defend yourself. So they can't really like do too much of that. It's too easy to shatter the reality of like, oh, this is an interesting and populated world. You can very quickly be like, oh no, I'm alone in a blue expanse of nothingness and I'm going to die out here.
Yes, agreed. And so I think that what you kind of made me think of something, which is that in games like in actually in all games, but in games like this, I think that the difference comes in like choice versus consequences, right? So when I play D&D, right, as a player, which doesn't happen all the time, right? But when I play D&D as a player, I don't normally like random encounters, right? Especially if you're using event-based experience, not killing monsters experience, right? The reason why is because it's like, oh, here's a random encounter. Go fight it. And you're like, oh, okay, fine. I'll slog through and beat these things. And yeah, enjoying the mechanics is great, but it doesn't feel like I'm moving over a step that gets me towards my goal. It feels like I was running and somebody threw something in my path, right? So what I think that matters about the so that's a consequence, right? Where it's just like, I'm going along from point A to point B, and then all of a sudden I am waylaid by jackassery, right? Whereas choice, which is like more so in Breath of the Wild, is when it's like I'm going from point A to point B and I can kind of see the outlook of the terrain, right? And I can make a choice of I'm going to go up this mountain and fly down. It's going to take a little bit more time and be a little bit more sloggy, but it'll get me there. Or, you know what, if I cut through this ravine, I don't have to glide anywhere, but there might be monsters. And then I made a choice. Then I'm like, okay, I'm going to take this route. Or you know what, I'm actually going to take this third route because there's another little thing that looks kind of interesting that I want to check out on my way. Or I'm looking at them, so like all of that feels more organic than, I'm going from point A to point B and then they're like, hey man, you want to play this little minute game? I was like, oh, I mean, yes, sure. It's like, hey man, you want to fight this shark? It's like, I guess I have to, because this is all just stuff that's coming up on my way. And I had no way to kind of like make a judgment call on, yeah, this is kind of the way I want to approach this. Right. So I think that it's my patience for it goes whether or not it's a choice that I made to take the higher risk or whether it's a consequence that I couldn't have prepared for.
Well, and they exacerbate that a little bit with, as the game goes on, if you have not been feeding the fish the bait and filling out your sea chart, then you have more necessary information you have to keep in your head, which is harder to do, which means you're more likely to get lost, which is what happened to me until I was like, oh, I got to feed all these fish. Like anytime I see a fish, like I'm Rockefeller throwing silver coins at the peasants because I need their help, right? If they don't work in my factories, then I'm no longer JD Rockefeller. If the fish are not filling out my sea chart, then I'm just wandering aimlessly because I can't keep all of this information in my head, right? So I let too much time go on where I was kind of like, if I saw one, I would feed them, but I wasn't seeking them out, which led to a lost and frustrated feeling more often, which forces your attention back onto like, oh, right, I'm trying to get here and I know it's vaguely over here somewhere. And I guess I have to deal with the shark because I've had to go back and forth this way 5 times because I think it's over here somewhere. Right. And so the spooky music that I talked about, like the and you see the fin comes racing up from behind you. Like the first few times that happens, you're like, oh my God, like there's wildlife out here. But after you've gotten lost a few times and you have thrown the boomerang at that same shark that many times, you're just like, this isn't even somebody threw something in my path. This is someone was standing close to the road, so I had to keep my eye on them, but they didn't do anything, and so I just ran past. Like this, so it's even less eventful. Which again, like it's a game about checking rooms. Like if the world is supposed to be about exploration, anything that makes exploration less fun is a massive detriment.
Yes, it makes me think of and also too with the bait and the fish, right? is that bait isn't something that is an unlimited supply item, right? You have to go buy it, which means you have to have rupees to go buy it, which means that you have to go potentially do other sloggy stuff to go get rupees, right? So let me ask you something. What's the difference between killing 20 zombies who are obstructing your forward path or killing a bunch of zombies, collecting hearts, and taking them back to town to buy an item that you need to progress the game? Answer 4 hours, right? It's that, right? They built some of these feedback loops into it that require you to have these money sinks and getting bait. The thing I always liked about some Zelda games, right, is that when you got a lot of rupees, especially Link to the Past, I think did this particularly well, is I really, really, really wanted to get 599 rupees because then I could get the Zora flippers. And once I could get the Zora flippers, things were awesome. Or I could go get like a blue potion and that could be really helpful. Or I could go get this other, some extra bombs or some arrows when I was low on arrows. So I could use arrows more often. These were things I was excited to purchase. In later Zelda games, they have a bunch of money sinks where you have to buy stuff that you do not care about, right? Like a great example of things that feel the same between the two, and this all links back to the bait in this one, but it's like, okay, in Link to the Past, you went and you spent money and you got the Zora flippers, and that allowed you to swim in the water, and that was awesome, right? Oh my god, that was so cool. Then in Ocarina of Time, you had to spend like X amount of rupees, I forget what, to get, like, if I remember correctly, to get the red tunic, right? And all the red tunic did was allow you to be in the place you had to go next. Like, that was there was no real other use for it. It just let you be there. And you're like, oh, all right,
Well,
so and
there's
this
lots
one
of places you can swim that are not necessary, but there is nowhere you go where you need the red tunic that isn't necessary. There are no hot areas that are not must go here to progress. And
even also, like, you can't really get the red tunic until it's time to get the red tunic, until it's a MacGuffin that you need, as opposed to, I got this red tunic a while ago, and yeah, there were a couple of like little caves that I fell into or in Breath of the Wild, where it's like, there's a whole area I can't get to unless I have this fire-resistant stuff, and I really want to go there, so I went and got the fire-resistant stuff. Eventually, I needed it, but I got it way beforehand. Anyways, I say all that to say that the bait is very similar to that. Is you're making me spend money. Bait is like spending money on friggin' rent as opposed to a ticket to Disney World, right? It's something that I have to spend money on, so I guess I'm going to spend money on it. But again, I'm not playing Rent Simulator 2023. I want to play The Legend of Zelda. So I didn't like the whole bait mechanic. Just give me an infinite amount of bait, so then I get excited about exploring and finding a fish. Not like, okay, I just found a fish, so that means I got to go spend more money. I got to go find somebody else that I found 50,000 times and go spend money on bait. Just let me be excited about like little splashy off in the distance. Oh boy, there's a fish. Not like, oh boy, I just spent $20,
Well, there are other ways I think you could maybe tease it out. Maybe this would be terrible, but like something else that springs to mind is make bait a limited resource, but let it be something that is always useful. So what I mean is, if you are within X amount of meters of a fish, it only takes one throw of bait to get them to come. But if you are within like 5x, then it takes 5x baits, right? But they will eventually come, right? And you could see the little splash getting, closer and closer off in the distance. So if you get truly lost, you can be like, okay, wait, I need a fish. I need a fish, right? And like you raise your hand and you're like, fish, come help me, right? Something to just make it not literally just a ticket to ride, right? Because and the thing is, and this is where I honestly fall down on this as like, it's not a graceful landing, because I am of two minds about, I like that this game actually doesn't hold your hand too much. You always know what to do. The thing I didn't realize until about 2/3 of the way through the game is there is virtually zero superfluous information. So if someone tells you something, it is important, right?
Yeah.
So they tell you up front, hey, here's where you get bait. Here's how you use it to catch fish. And I was like, oh, neat. But no one smashes you over the head and is like, it will ruin the game if you don't engage with this. You must do this, right? And I don't want to incentivize that. I don't want to incentivize, beating you over the head with every single thing you must do, because I do think there's something valuable to the experience of like, oh no, I should have been doing this all along, and now I need to like go back and find the fish and feed them and like flesh out my sea chart so I know where the hell I'm going, right? But I often can't engage with that because I'm like, oh no, I now have to put a bunch of additional time into this, and whether or not I'm willing to do that isn't the actual limiting factor. It's, can I even choose to invest that time, right? So a lot of people will just nope out when they're like, oh, you mean I should have been collecting golden feathers this whole time, and now I have to go grind golden feathers? I'm not gonna do that. I don't care, right? And then they just quit out of the game. So I don't want people to be turned away for not treating every mechanic as serious, but I also don't want the game to be like, nah, man, you have to do this. We're going to put you in a corridor where you kill 20 monsters so you get 20 golden feathers, because if you don't have 20 golden feathers, you can't do the next thing. And it's like, but if you were going to force me to get them in a corridor I couldn't leave until I had 20 golden feathers, then why do I need them? What was the point of this corridor other than to make the game longer, right? That's the grinding for hearts and going back to town. So like, I don't know exactly how that needle is threaded, where it's like, let me fail, but also don't make failure so costly that I opt out of the game.
Right. No, I agree with that. I think that, and it's a difficult needle to thread, you know. I mean, that's what defines a good game from a great game, right? And I think that, so for example, like in my experience, right, is that the tutorial, so one of the things I think that I might have original NES Zelda to blame for this is I have, especially in my older age, zero tolerance for people not letting me play the game I want to play. Like
that is true.
Yeah, like if somebody says, you know, hey man, you want to come play this game about like medieval rats? I'm like, yeah man, let's play a game about medieval rats. Cool, man. Okay, so here's how the controller works. Got it. All right, let's try thing. Oh wait. So before you go, you need to know this. Okay, all right. So, I'm like, no. You know what? I don't really care about your game about medieval rats anymore. You know, screw you. This, to me, fell more on the side of just let me go play the game, right? Because you start off on Outset Island, right? And then they're like, hey, so first you got to go get a sword. I'm like, okay, got to go get the sword. That's fine. It's like, all right, cool. Now, here's how you use the sword. Here's how you swing vertically. Here's how you swing horizontally. Here's how you do this. Here's how you do that. And you got to like sit there and spend about 10 minutes wailing on this poor old dude, you know?
Not a poor old dude, man. He, again, you adventure at his grace. Like, he could have wrecked you.
Yes, he could have, but you know, so I guess you're not wailing on him, but training with this guy, right? And as I was doing this, I was like, you know what? Just if any of this is critical must-have information, then give it to me in a little bit. Let me get comfortable with the sword, because that's the thing. They teach you all of the sword techniques at the beginning. It's like, no, just give me the sword, and I know how to do a horizontal swing. I'm good, right? And then like maybe in the first half an hour, just kind of put a door or something with like vines that go horizontally, and they're like, oh, you need to do an upward swing to do this. And it's like, oh, okay, how do I do that? You know, because now I've gotten comfortable with the first thing. I got to play with it a little bit, and now I'm interested in this new stuff. And then maybe I would feel particularly brilliant by executing a parry without even being told, you know. And then I feel like I'm the adventurer learning along with the avatar, as opposed to you know, just being told like, okay, now go do thing A, now go do thing B, now go check this box, now go get the shield, now go do this thing. Like, how awesome would it have been if you could just not get the shield? If they pointed to it 3 or 4 times, but you could leave Outside Island and be like, no, I didn't get it. I just wasn't paying close enough attention and
didn't pick it up. Don't need it.
Yeah, because eventually in one of the later dungeons, you get the reflective mirror shield, which is the one you have to have. So I think it'd be kind of cool if you were like, yeah, I actually played like 3/4 of the game and never had a shield because I didn't pick it up and didn't realize it, you know. And again, like they need to point to it enough time to be like, check out this shield. This shield's pretty cool. So you're gonna go get the shield? Nah. You know,
don't care. And you make a good point about the sword play, because I actually have in my notes like, wow, the sword play is really sophisticated. Why is it so sophisticated? Like, you can do, because there was one point where I was just fighting an enemy and it was like they were guarding, and so I was getting annoyed, so it was just like button mashing, and I accidentally did this like little dashy like upward spinning strike, and I was like, what the hell was that? And and the game never requires it, right? There's you can do like little parry things, you can do little flippy things, you can do little like roll and jumpy things. And I would say, like, just for reference, there's probably a dozen moves you can do, of which 3 are required. Like, you can go through the entire game with basic swipe, basic shield, and parry. Like that, that's all is required to beat the game. And I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was like, you made me learn how to do, I had to fight the old man for like 10 minutes. Like, when am I going to use any of these things? And again, this is something I'm of two minds of, because on the one hand, I'm like, well, it's cool that the sword play system is like pretty sophisticated. But on the other hand, I'm like, why did you shove it down my throat if it wasn't required? Like, either make it sophisticated, and then when I discovered on my own, I feel like a goddamn genius. And then I realized this boss is super easy because I, the player, became a better sword fighter, or just don't have sophisticated swordplay if it's not there's no reason, right? The tutorial is pointless because it is never so wildly beneficial that you wouldn't just hit the sword button and chop them, right? Because every boss has their, you know, their formulaic pattern of like bring them down, go up to them, run around to the back of them or whatever, hit them while they're vulnerable, and then get them to their vulnerable state again, right? Which is like, it's fine. Like I actually found the boss fights pretty engaging and pretty well done, but I never did any fancy sword moves in any of them. I just wailed on their vulnerable spot.
Right. And I think that this is another good example of a place where it's like, you know, to your point, right, is of two minds, right? Because you don't want to be beaten over the head with a tutorial, but you also kind of, if they created this amazing swordplay, I can kind of see them wanting to, you know, show it off and make sure that you at least know that it exists. And that's where it's great to create like an opt-in system, right? So, you know, you're floating around with your boat, and then all of a sudden one of the islands, there's like that's where one of the old dudes is. And he goes like, hey, you want to learn some cool techniques? You come talk to me. And then maybe if you master the technique, he gives you like 50 rupees or something like that, you know, like something to make it so way, even if you already knew it and you opted in and it felt like a waste of time. It's like, oh yeah, but I got like a cool little thing, you know? Or even if you wanted to really do it, what you could do is, let's say that there's like 5 super cool techniques that are hidden and you never really need, but 5 trainers somewhere in the world, and each one of them gives you a little thing that when you put it together, it gives you a cool 6th ability that, you know, is really neat and really cool and really fun. And when you go and talk to them, they can say, I am here to teach you technique number 1. Do you already know it? And if you say yes, then they say, show me, and you show it to them once, and then they say, yep, you got it, you know? Or you could say, if you say no, then they go, okay, now here's how you do it. Now show me. Because then it's, if you master it all, just you're a prodigy and you master the entire swordplay system on your own, it's very easy to go get the 6th technique, takes X amount of time, and you're done, right? That to me would be the better way to do it than like, because honestly, and again, this is definitely me being, you know, in my late 30s and saying like, you know what, this is, I'm an old stodgy old man now, is that I'm like, you know what, I get all day during my day job, I am told what to do and how to do it, and there's SOPs and ways to do things, and you know, so when I get home, I'm like, don't tell me what to do, let me adventure, you know. And so yeah, it would just feel a lot more exciting instead of like, here's how you do technique 1, here's how you do technique, because by the time they got to the 3rd technique, I was like, I will kill you, old man, you know. Like I was like, I am done, like stop teaching me, I got it. And so I kind of checked out, you know. So I don't think that I would have gotten the depth of enjoyment out of the swordplay. I did not get as much of it or use as much of it or retain as much of it, because just like in the real world, when you front load a bunch of information on somebody, they forget a lot of it. And I did.
Yeah, I did. And this is where you can see the decisions the designers made based on their value system, right? Which is completely subjective. So the swordplay tutorial is all completely front loaded, and then they basically never talk about it again. So you just, whatever works for you, right? If you, and you can go back and talk to him again, but if you are continuing to defeat enemies, you would probably never ever do that, because why would you bother? You don't need that safe space to practice because there's no advanced technique that you need to practice. On the other hand, they were obviously afraid of people getting lost, because when you first get the boat and they're like, all right, go get the 3 hero medals, I mean pearls, go get the 3 pearls, they say, here's the boat, here you get the sail from the guy who's inexplicably wearing a parka in the tropics, and then you go get on the boat and you start sailing, and they tell you exactly where you need to sail, which is critical because you haven't fed any fish yet, so your sea chart is completely empty. But what you could not notice if you weren't trying to be difficult is if you just say, all right, I'll get around to that, and try to go wander, the boat stops you. King Red Boat, King Lion Boat, whatever. He's like, nah, buddy, we got to go get these pearls. I told you that's what we're doing. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I was sailing and I saw something came into the draw distance, and I was like, oh, what's that over there? No, buddy. Gotta go get these pearls. That's what we're doing right now. We're going to go get these pearls because you need them for reasons that I don't remember actually being explained terribly well. So it's just like, oh, okay, I guess we're going to get these pearls. And that's fine, but the guardrails are invisible right up until you crash into them, right? So
yep.
you it seems like you could just sail anywhere and do anything, and the whole world is yours to explore. And they do that. Once you get the Master Sword, or maybe either right before the Master Sword or right after you get the Master Sword, they're like, whatever you want, like, go, you're free, right? The reins come off. But that's like a third of the way into the game before the wide blue ocean is completely available to you. So that's like, it was a lot. And I just made my peace with it. I was like, okay, there's a certain amount of go here, go here, go here that they're making me do. But because of the aesthetic of being on a boat on the ocean with the blue skies in all directions, it feels weird to just imagine like, oh, how close am I to the invisible wall that'll make the boat yell at me? Am I many nautical miles from the invisible wall, or would one small turn make the boat start yelling at me? And like, that's just a weird feeling in like an exploration centric game.
Oh no, 100% agreed. I mean, and that's the thing is that, again, like, to me, is I like to, and we discussed this in one of the nostalgia goggles episodes. For example, if they march on your map, here's where you want to go next. I can about face and say I'm going in the exact opposite direction because I want to, and you can't legally stop me. And then I go and I get my lunch eaten, and that's okay, right? But when like you're sailing, and then Navi turns to you and says, "Hey, no, you got to go in this direction to get the pearl," and you go in another direction, and he's like, "Hey," Navi says again, "Oh, I'm sorry, King Redboat, that's my bad." But when the ferry boat is yelling at you, hey, you need to go in this direction, it's annoying, and the thing is that, like, this again, and one of the other notes I wanted to touch on is that I feel like that they really missed like what we liked about Ocarina, because they were like, what they liked about Ocarina of Time was the music, and you're like, I didn't hate the music, it wasn't why I played. And you know what else they liked Navi, and it's like, I don't know. Mm-mm. So, but this is the start of like where they said, what we're going to do is we're going to take the Ocarina of Time formula and we're going to make some change. We're going to try some new things, but we're definitely going to hang on to these things. And then people hit them hard and said, we did not like that. And then they said, got it, no risks ever again. And so then they doubled down on some of this stuff. But this is the beginning of like Navi and, Red, whatever his name is, Lion, Red Lion?
King Lion.
Yeah. And
Fee.
Yeah, and all of those, like, oh, you got to go do this. Oh, you got to go do that. It's like, stop it. Like, just let me go explore and let me go die. That's okay. As long as I think that the big thing is let me know where I need to go and then let me go anywhere, because then I've made a choice of like, I know that this is where I need to go next. If I want to progress the plot, if I want to do this, and then, let me go fight something else and be like, oh man, I can't believe I couldn't even touch this thing. And then I go and I'm like, oh, because I didn't have silver arrows. I see now. And then I go back and kill it. I'm like, oh, you see, look, I learned and I got bigger and better, as opposed to, invisible Navi guardrails.
Yeah. And so once those invisible guardrails came off, actually, if you looked at my notes, I was not just taking notes on the review of the game, but I had a bunch of like, oh, there was this like weird shimmery chest on a small island outside of this town. And I don't know, I don't know what to do. Like, I can't interact with it, right? Or like, there's this weird guy, or there's this thing that caught my attention, and like, I didn't know what it was. So I'd like literally write the coordinates down. So like, oh, I want to circle back here. And some of them you naturally circle back to because you have to go deal with that for some reason, or there's strong incentives to go back there. But some of them are just like hearts or rupees or whatever that you could just completely miss. And that felt good because I was deciding to interact with those things, right? I was deciding like, oh, they obviously, the world is largely featureless, and here is a feature, so that feature probably matters, right? They do a very stark job of like, things don't exist if they're pointless, right? Pretty much, if something exists, it's because it matters, which is why so much of the world is empty, because there isn't really fluff or filler, right? And that even goes for the dungeon designs and the boss room designs. So I enjoyed that part a lot, but I kind of had to put myself into, what it is? It's almost like the feeling of an escape room where you suspend your disbelief. You know that this is a ride. It's an attraction, right? So like, the murderer is never really going to come in and kill you. The roof's never really going to collapse. Like, there's certain boundaries that you just accept are fun. Like, oh, we're going to pretend we're under threat or whatever. But there's something I don't know how to do it. I honestly have no idea how to even address this problem, but there's some way I wish you could communicate to a player, like, you need to do some out of universe stuff to keep track. Like, we're not going to put wave markers on everything, right?
Right.
But there are some boundaries, and we are going to steer you around a little. So, like, we are together making this experience, right? And some games, because of their scope, like a Super Mario World, like you start flying with the cape and you think, I'm so smart, I'm just flying over these dumb Goombas. And then you smash into the wall and you realize there's a hidden exit way up there. And you're like, there was nothing. There was nothing to indicate that this was up here. But because I was using the features that the game gave me in the form of the cape, and I was just flying because flying is fun, and cheesing all the platforming challenges and all the enemies is fun. There's a thing up here. Is there a thing up everywhere? Right. And then you start flying around all crazy, and often you are rewarded, right?
Sorry, to that point though, one of the things that they do that I think is really clever is that because in Super Mario World, right, you're just flying around the cape and you're doing it because you're having a great time. But they do on the worlds where where there is a secret somewhere, it's a red dot, and on the ones where it's not, it's a yellow dot. So you know that, like, hey, there's something over here. The developer's like, hey man, if you care, something over here. And the first 5 times I played through, I didn't care. I just played through the game because I wanted to beat the game. But then, like, I was like, where is that red dot? You know? And then, so sometimes you just find it because you were flying around, or sometimes, but if you wanted to go find it, again, like the amount of guiding, right? They didn't come to a halt and be like, this level has 2 exits and you got to find them both, right? Is they said, normal exit, man. Here's another exit in case you're interested. And you're like, oh, I opt into that. Please help, so sorry to interrupt. Continue.
No, that's exactly the kind of feeling I'm talking about, which is, again, like, just to be fair to these, because I feel like I've been very negative on the game. What I'm describing is exceptionally hard, right?
Yes.
Which is why there are a handful of games that do it amazingly well, a lot of games that do it well enough, and many games that fail catastrophically because it's super, super hard. And I actually think, in general, this universe and the way it's executed, like, I was okay with the guardrails once I realized what I was dealing with, right? Once I realized, oh, this is not an open world like it looks like it is, and this is not a completely linear game like some Zeldas are. This is sort of a co-experience. Like, there are boundaries, but they're kind of far away, but I will shatter the illusion if I'm constantly pushing against those boundaries, right? So you have to sort of know what you're getting into, and just because of the aesthetic choice they made with the Waterworld universe, it feels boundless, which probably tempted a lot of players to smashing face first into those invisible walls and then being like, what the hell? Like, what? I can see there's a thing over there on the horizon. Like, let me sail over there. Which brings me to the thing that I actually feel the strongest about, which is the Triforce quest. So before I start saying a bunch of words about this, did you have anything you wanted to say about the?
No, I was ready to go to did it hold up? So
I have to talk about the Triforce quest because this is where I need to admit the truth. I played the HD remake of this, and I played the HD remake of this game because of this moment. So I knew that at some point you had to sail all over the goddamn world to collect the fragments of the Triforce, or your piece of the Triforce, not the whole thing. It's just the Triforce of Courage. And there's 8 of them, and they're spread out all over the damn place. And you have to go, it's like a MacGuffin chain. So it's like you have to have the tools you need to get onto this island to get the map that will tell you where to go find the Triforce piece. And the HD remake is, the graphics are slightly improved. You get widescreen. The music is slightly higher fidelity, but overall, it is basically the exact same game. There are a few little mechanical tweaks that you would notice if you saw the game side by side, but it is very much the same game until this moment, until you hit the Triforce quest, because they just threw a bunch of the MacGuffins straight in the garbage. Like, you don't have to go A to B to C. You just go straight to piece of the Triforce. They are in a more confined area, so you do like less insane like sailing back and forth. And critically, you get the double speed sail. And the double speed sail, which I think is called the Swift sail, not only does it let you move literally twice as fast, but you don't have to use the Wind Waker to change the direction of the wind. Whichever direction you're going, that is the way the wind is blowing. It just magically shifts around with you. And so I knew that this was coming up, and I was like, I will quit out at that point. Because I try to finish every game we play, and I was like, I won't do it. I won't do that long of a nightmarish fetch quest. And I was talking to Mike about it. Mike, be quiet. I'll tell the story. I was talking to Mike about it. Shut up. And I said, I like this would have made me quit out. I'm really glad I played the HD re-release. And he said, I did quit out. And Mike is a huge Zelda fan. But when this game came out on GameCube, he noped out when he got to the Triforce quest and didn't actually finish this game until the HD release. So I was like, oh man, if he wasn't willing to put up with that nonsense in 2003, I never ever would have been willing to put up with that nonsense. Not with my gaming time being so limited now. And I have to be honest, I did play the HD re-release. And I think this is the actual difference, is like, as we talk about whether or not we think you should play this game, if you are choosing to play this game, you have to play the HD re-release, literally just for the Triforce quest. Everything else is similar enough that it doesn't matter. Yes, it does look a little bit better. Yes, you get widescreen, but this is the actual inflection point. So now I think we can talk about whether or not we thought it held up.
Did it?
No. So I'm going to say nostalgia monocle. And the reason for that is I actually enjoyed this game quite a lot. And if you like 3D Zelda, right? If you like Ocarina, if you liked Majora's Mask, if you like Twilight Princess, and you somehow missed this one, I would say, like, yes, definitely go play it. Play the HD re-release for all the things I just said. But if you somehow, like, just because of your game's lived experience, if when you think of Zelda, you think of Link to the Past and then Breath of the Wild, like, no, you could probably skip this one, because this won't be what you want it to be. This looks and feels like the freedom of Breath of the Wild right up until you actually try to cash in on that freedom. And then it's super not. It is way more, you got to go here, you got to do this, you got to go here, you got to do that. And the reason I still enjoyed the experience is because I actually enjoyed the story a lot. I really liked the idea that, like, I don't want to save the world. I don't think the world even needs saving. I'm just trying to save my sister. Other people are telling me the world is in threat. And the only reason I care about that at all is because Ganondorf is between me and saving my sister, right? And then you eventually do save your sister, and that's around the time they're like, by the way, you are probably actually the legendary hero, so we kind of need you to keep adventuring. And the way they frame it, though, is because your sister isn't safe, because the world isn't safe, right? So you go on to still want to, stab Ganondorf in the face, not because he is holding your sister hostage. He is holding her hostage metaphorically. The world is in threat, right? It's
by second degree hostage.
Yes. And so, like, I love that as a motivation, right? Tetra, I love her reveal that, like, she doesn't know she's Zelda. And then when she realizes she is Zelda, she kind of rails against it. And then at the end of the game, she's like, I'm a pirate. Screw that noise. Like, and kind of goes back to, like, being an autonomous person who does what she wants to do. Like, I thought that was a cool twist. The boss fights are fairly fun. Some of them can slow down when you're, like, waiting for the vulnerability window. But overall, I enjoyed the game, but I was just very aware that it is right at that, like, formula peak, right? It's like right around peak formula. And because I don't enjoy the moment-to-moment combat in 3D Zeldas very much, I was like, there's a lot of slog in this, and I'm dealing with that slog for the story, right? Mm-hmm. So I have to say nostalgia monocle. If you know you already like other 3D Zeldas and you miss this one, like, yes, totally, go play it. But otherwise, like, it is skippable, which sucks because it is a really lovingly made game that still feels very skippable.
So I'm right on the edge, but I think I'm going to go full nostalgia goggles, Ooh. Like, again, it's not like Jekyll and Hyde nostalgia goggles, right? Where it's like this, burn this all to the ground. I could be convinced to give it a nostalgia monocle. But to me, I co-sign everything you just said, except I don't care about the story that much, and it didn't, on top of that, like, the story, it was fine. It was interesting and it was unique and novel, but not to the point where I felt like it needed to be played. I would be fine with if you're, like, making dinner, and you want to, the two things I think that this game brings to the table is a unique art style and a unique story, right? Everything else about it is kind of forgettable, right? So I say that to say that a great way to interact with this, where you can get a cool look at the art style and a cool look at the story, is watch a long play. Do dinner, whatever, cue it up on your phone. Whenever you're doing something where you can kind of like look at something from time to time, do that and live your best life, right? But it doesn't really. Then you've got somebody who can get through the sloggy parts super fast, and you can just skip through the sloggy parts whenever you're like, this is a slog, I don't really care about this. You just fast forward the video, right? So to me, I agree with you. Like that. If you're a completionist, then it's worth playing. Like, it's not one to the point where it's nostalgia goggles, to the point where I'm like, don't infect your GameCube by placing this game in it, right? If you're a completionist, go ahead and play it. But if you're just kind of in Zelda for fun, this game could be lost to the wind.
The curtain falls, the music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black. And you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone. There's no player two there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creeping with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day.